Help support Name Explained by leaving a like and a comment, sharing this video and by subscribing to the channel. The idea of Arabia is somewhat provocative. Ask many people to conjure up an idea of Arabia in their mind and I'm sure you'll get images of flying carpets, magical lamps, bustling bazaars and swashbuckling adventures that will come to mind for many. Basically all the tropes of the Arabian Nights. Yet, that's all in the past. Modern Arabia, more correctly known as the Arabian Peninsula, is not one unified nation or land which houses all of these ideas. It is instead land split into 7 countries. Kind of. There are a couple of other countries which have some land within the Arabian Peninsula, but for this video, we're just going to stick with the nations that are undisputably Arabian. The 7 countries we are focusing on today, however, all have their own unique histories, cultures, and of course, names. Though there's a bit of cross-pollination in a couple of their names. But anyway, let's dive into this portion of the Middle East and find out how the countries of Arabia got their names. And you know what? Let's look into their capitals too, just because I want to, I guess. Though before we look into the nations and the cities, we really ought to understand what the word of Arabia means, right? Anyone somewhat versed in place name origins will be able to tell you that Arabia comes from the name of a group of people. This is obvious due to the "ia" suffix at the end of the name Arabia. The suffix means land of the in Latin and is often seen after the tribe name, the tribe in this case being the Arabs. Arab is probably a term you've heard of before. It started life as a demonym for people who lived in the Arabian Peninsula, but as the Arab world expanded into other parts of Asia and Northern Africa, Arab became a term for anyone who lives here too, or speaks the language of Arabic or a variation of it. Arab as a word in its own right is pretty old, and we have many theories from multiple languages as to where it may ultimately come from. Ideas range from meaning desert, nomad, and merchant, just to name a few ideas in various Semitic languages. These ideas relate to how and where the initial Arabs lived their lives. However the word came into being, it got picked up by the Greeks and then the Romans, who referred to the land they live in as Arabia. In fact, during the time of ancient Rome, the term Arabia was used in the names of 3 different provinces, not all of which equate to land in modern Arabia. One of these were Arabia Petrea, which is located just on the cusp of the modern peninsula. The latter part of this name means stony and relates to the geography of the land. Likewise, Arabia Deserta, meaning desert Arabia, was used for the main bulk of the peninsula, which is mainly desert. And then they also had Arabia Felix. This means fortunate Arabia or lucky Arabia, and was used for the southern tip of the peninsula. This part was seen as lucky as it had way more greenery and rainfall than the other parts of the land, making it far less inhospitable in the ancient past. Now we have an understanding of where the word Arabia itself comes from. We can cover the largest nation that resides on the peninsula, Saudi Arabia. The latter half of this name of course reflects the fact this nation is in Arabia. The Saudi part of the name reflects the origins of the nation in its many forms. The nation came into being in its current state in 1932. Prior to this, the land was a series of emirates. The person who oversaw the unification of this nation was Abdulaziz bin Abdul Rahman Al Saud, known to many as just Ibn Saud. He was the first king of the nation, and the Saudi part of the nation's name comes from the last part of his name, which is also the name of the royal house he is part of, the House of Saud. This house dates back even further to the 18th century with Muhammad bin Saud Al Muqrin. Saudi is simply an adaptation of the Saud name, with that name thought to come from the Arabic Saad, meaning good fortune and happiness. The capital of this nation is Riyadh. This name unsurprisingly comes from Arabic too, from the word of Rahad. This name means gardens or meadows and derives from the fact that this city was built on fertile land amongst the deserts here. It's fertile due to the seasonal river that is nearby. Of course, now Riyadh is hugely urbanized, so the meadows are a tad more difficult to see. A much smaller nation found on the peninsula, however, is Kuwait. Kuwait is one of those fun examples of a nation being named after its capital city, which in this case is called Kuwait City. So the etymology of Kuwait is a real 2 birds 1 stone scenario. Once again, it's from Arabic. Just presume everything's from Arabic unless otherwise mentioned. And their word of Al-Kuwat, which roughly translates into meaning fortress surrounded by water. This makes sense as the city is by the water. In fact, most of the nation is surrounded by water as it's nestled on the Persian Gulf. According to one source, the area that makes up the nation was once called Curain. There is apparently an area in the nation that still bears this name, called Curain City. And according to Wikipedia, this name means elevated land / hill, which is kind of different to the name Kuwait, which relates to water. While Bahrain is seen as part of Arabia, its land is not actually connected to the peninsula. It is instead an island nation off the eastern coast within the Persian Gulf. It is connected by a series of bridges. The name comes from the term Al-Balan, which means the two seas. This is a bit of an odd one, as the island that houses this nation is firmly within one body of water, the aforementioned Persian Gulf. What the two seas in this name relates to is debated. Some feel it means the east and west bays, while others think it means the north and south bays, while others argue it relates to the fresh water found on the island and the seawater that surrounds it. In all honesty, any of these could be the truth. The name has appeared throughout Arabic history, and in many cases, it is not related to the island. The island's capital is called Manama, which is super fun to say. Manama. Love that. The city's name apparently means the place of rest or the place of dreams. Why exactly it means this, I have no idea, but it's a nice idea to name a city after. I'd love to go somewhere I could just sleep all day. But from the looks of it, this huge city seems anything but restful. Now onto the one nation in Arabia I've actually been to, Qatar. I mean, I was only there for a few hours on a stopover to Sri Lanka, but that counts right. Qatar is found on a peninsula on the Arabian Peninsula itself, and the name relates to something this part of the world is very well known for. Oil. Oil is one of the key reasons as to why so many of these nations can build such extravagant cities and purchase football players and even whole clubs. While many of these nations are oil rich, Qatar is seemingly the only one named after the stuff. The name comes from Qatran, which means tar/resin. While this could relate to other kinds of thick fluids, why did that sound so wrong to say? It most likely relates to the oil found here. An earlier form of this name can be found with the Roman Catala, which comes from the same root, and I've never really thought about the idea that the Romans knew of oil. It's not like they used it in the way we do now. I looked to see what they did with the stuff, and apparently it was mainly used for lubricating chariots and being mixed with beeswax to help waterproof ships. We can only imagine what would have happened if Rome figured out the combustion engine, right? The nation's capital of Doha, however, comes from the word of Doha, which means roundness. This was in relation to the roundness of the bays that surrounded the city. Heading south of Qatar, however, we have the United Arab Emirates. This is one of the three united nations, along with the kingdom and the states, which are on our globe. This name can simply be explained by saying it's a series of Arab Emirates which united. But we need to pad this video a tad more to get to that 10-minute mark. So why don't we look into that word of emirate? This is a word deeply linked to the Arab world, and it means land under the rule of an emir, a title in the Arabic world. The word emirate comes from this title, and the title itself comes from the word Amir, meaning commander. This, interestingly enough, is also where we get the word of admiral from too. Dubai is probably the most known city in the nation, but its capital is actually Abu Dhabi. The name of this capital translates to mean the father of the gazelle. This is a really cool name, and it may come from the fact that before the city was established, this land was home to a huge amount of these animals. I imagine this would have specifically been the Arabian sand gazelle. They're really cute animals, though I can't imagine they're that abundant in modern Abu Dhabi. Venturing further south, we arrive in Oman, and Oman. This is a super old name. The earliest mention we have of this name comes from a tomb not in the nation itself, but from the neighbouring nation of UAE. This tomb mentions the King of Oman. From here, however, we aren't entirely sure where it comes from. The leading theory is that it comes from the name of a former ruler. There's even a theory that the name isn't Arabic, but actually of Persian origins instead. The capital's name is thankfully a tad more understood by us. Muscat's name means hidden. This is in relation to the hills that surround the city. Muscat is quite coincidentally the name of a type of wine too. There's no relation between these two, however. And finally, we have Yemen. This is the southernmost nation of the peninsula, and its name reflects this fact. Yemen is believed to literally translate to mean the country of the south. This word comes from the older word of Yaman, which means the right side, as in the opposite of left, not the correct side. I love the fact that this name only really makes sense if you're looking eastward on the peninsula, as the south is to your right if you face that way. Yemen's capital is officially Sana'a. This name simply means well fortified. I say this is the capital officially because it's not actually being used as the capital at the moment. Yemen moved the capital city to Aden in 2014 after a coup in the nation. The name of this city probably means something like plain or lowland, or even just the place. The coup that made Yemen relocate their capital was a very serious matter, to understate it, and to finally address the elephant in the room, the nations on the peninsula as a whole have had their fair share of controversies thrown their way, from human rights violations to the mistreatment of minorities, women and journalists. You don't have to dig too deep to find some ominous news coming from this corner of the globe. Part of me didn't want to highlight these nations in a video due to these facts, yet I want to talk about this part of the world because the decisions made by the people in power, which generate so much of the unworthiness unwelcome news that comes from here, I genuinely don't feel reflect the views of the many people who live in these nations. And of course, the names of these nations, like all names, are still worth explaining. Name Explained depends on viewers like yourself supporting the channel financially on Patreon, so a huge thank you to everyone who does. Donating just $1 a month helps the channel amazingly and gets you bonuses including ad-free videos, exclusive content, the power to request ideas to be made into actual Name Explained videos, and your name at the end of the video with all these awesome people. Visit patreon.com/Name Explained or click the link down below to find out how you too can support the channel. Thank you. Thanks for reaching the end of the video. Why not watch another and subscribe to keep up to date on all things Name Explained. You can find myself on Instagram where I'm Name Explained YT, and join the Facebook group Friends of Name Explained to talk with myself and other name nerds. All that will be linked down below. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video, and once again, thank you all so much.